David's week home after reaching Cascade Locks was a busy one. As previously mentioned, he helped me send our older son to Malaysia for a summer trip and our younger son off to college for the first time. He picked up new shoes, a new shirt, and a new pair of pants. Although his shoes were not used up yet, he was going to need a fresh pair to get him all the way to Canada. That's over 500 miles. He really liked how his 11 Skies pants performed, but his microspikes had done a number on their cuffs. The pants he had started wearing at the Mexico border were black and gray, and 11 Skies called them Midnight. This new pair were drab green with bright green pockets, and 11 Skies called these ones Earth. For the first time, he was getting compliments on his look. He still liked his white sun hoodie, although it was tough to wash. I should calculate how many hours I have stood over the sink helping him wash it one of these days. I can't believe he got the same shirt just in a bigger size so that he could put his thumbs through the holes comfortably. Because he was slimming down so much, he was swimming in the new shirt. He switched out his pack too. He really liked his ULA 75-liter Catalyst, but it was bigger than he needed. He wouldn't need any winter gear or a bear can to get to Canada. His Catalyst was getting pretty threadbare. He was going to need it again in the Sierras, so giving it a 500-mile break would be a good idea. He switched to his gently used Dan Durston 40-liter that just barely held everything. His hand injury was nearly healed, so he wouldn't have to bandage it anymore. So back on the train, then to a bus, then to another train, and to another bus to get back to Cascade Locks. He wandered into the Trail Day celebration just as everything was winding down. The vendors were packed up or packing up. There was still beer and food trucks. A raffle drawing was being held on the stage. While he was waiting for his food, he ran into Nate. Dave bought him a beer and they caught up. Nate seemed to know everyone. Nate was having a blast and planning on staying another night. He pointed out Kyle of Kyle Hates Hiking, who was at the back of the beer line, and Quadzilla. Dave was too shy to introduce himself. Nate had met Darwin of Darwin on the Trail earlier that day. He was there selling his new sun hoodie, which Dave wanted for Christmas. Spoiler alert, I got it for him. Spigot from just before Crater Lake said hi. Fortunately, she didn't mention gifting him toilet paper in front of Nate. Dave was tempted to stay, but he'd been off the trail for a week, and once he got to Canada, he still had to finish the Sierras, which Nate had already completed. So while the blood-red sun set, Dave left Cascade Locks and put Oregon in his rearview mirror. Crossing the Bridge of the Gods was momentous. He'd pick and eat blackberries for the second and last time on the trail. He'd only hiked 3 miles, but it was pitch black by the time he put up his tent. Lying in his sleeping bag, he could hear music and fireworks from the other side of the bridge. He'd only been off the trail for a week, but so much had seemed to have changed. The air was full of smoke, the days seemed so much shorter. 6 a.m. starts would now be before sunrise. It would be pitch black at 9 p.m. He did Oregon in 17 days, but Washington was much more mountainous, more miles, and the days were getting shorter. To have any hope of finishing the Sierras before the weather turned bad, he'd have to get to Canada by mid-September. Less than 4 weeks to complete 500 miles. No more blackberries, but plenty of huckleberries. That first full day back on the trail, he did 26.5 miles in just about 11 hours, and once again set up his tent in the dark. He camped next to the Trout Creek Bridge. The bridge probably looked pretty cool in the daylight. The next morning, he met a very talkative squirrel. He could taste the smoke in the air. At a road crossing just before Wind River, Dave saw a property with the highest density of no trespassing signs in the world. Well, it seemed that way to him. Speaking of Wind River, the crossing was very nice. It would have been nicer without the smoke. Dave was really dragging when he came to a water source at about the 20-mile mark. A couple of hikers Dave hadn't met before rolled in. Their names were DK and Bozo. DK was short for Donut King. DK told him that there was reportedly trail magic just about 2 miles down the trail at the road crossing. That put a fire in Dave's belly. That was a fast couple of miles. The trail magic was hosted by Cowboy and his helper Chainsaw. Cowboy had a certain way of doing things, and you couldn't deviate from his plan. That's okay. The hot dogs were worth it. Dave still had miles to go. DK was leaving at about the same time, so they hiked together. The miles just fly when you meet someone new and they want to talk. Believe it or not, DK, who was a young man, wanted life advice. Dave and I have been married a long time. DK wanted to know how Dave knew he wanted to marry me. Then DK wanted to know how to keep a marriage going for so long as we have. It all sounded quite sweet. Before long, Dave was dropping his pack. The sun hadn't even set yet, and he had managed to scratch off another 27 miles. The next morning, he discovered his tent was covered with sticky sap. So from now on, he kept his eye out for these white bark trees and tried to never set up under them. He woke up early again the next day and was pleasantly surprised to discover the air was a lot cleaner. Dave spent the morning collecting huckleberries and working on his plea for donations to his Relay for Life fundraising campaign.
Relay for Life this year. That's because I've been hiking the Pacific Crest Trail and I'll be kind of tired. I'm asking anyone who wants to support my Relay for Life campaign to donate 1 penny for every mile of the PCT I've hiked.
Around lunch, he crossed Twin Buttes Road where he met a couple taking a break from foraging for huckleberries. They had picked that spot to collect them because they like running into through hikers. The local town folk and the Native American tribe have an agreement. The town locals collect south of the road and the tribe collects to the north of the road. The couple gave Dave a Gatorade and some apple slices. They told him that he shouldn't eat more than a handful of raw huckleberries a day. Apparently the berries had a bacteria that will make you sick. Fortunately, berry foraging is time-consuming, and David hadn't eaten much more than a handful on the days that he found them, but from then on he was more careful. Dave ate the apples under a bridge right before the last big climb of the day. After the climb, he crossed the road to Trout Lake. The town of Trout Lake is a trail stop. At the road was a trail registry he signed. The pages were full of people he'd met: Spigot, Pena, Beach, Sunny D, Stitches, Lotto, and Karate Kid. The last section video should have mentioned Karate Kid. While Dave was hiking with Peter, aka Tallboy, they met Karate Kid. Karate Kid wears a red headband like Ralph Macchio in the movie. Karate Kid asked everyone on the trail for a song to add to his playlist. Dave suggested Desperado by the Eagles, which the young man hadn't heard of. Speaking of Peter, he signed the registry too. Also in the registry was Hazel, aka Mountain Goat. She hikes with the Codgers. Apparently they were 6 days ahead of him. Dave thought there was still a chance that he might be able to catch up and say hello. Just a mile past the road was a great creekside tent site. Turns out DK, Bozo, and a couple of the others were camping there. They managed to get to the town of Trout Lake and get back to the trail. Dave had hiked 26 miles. It was pretty impressive that DK's group had done about the same mileage as Dave, but they were still able to enjoy some civilization. Dave sat around the campfire with them while he cooked dinner. The next day, Dave saw a huge field of huckleberries, but he knew he couldn't eat his fill of them, so he came up with a plan. He stopped and harvested for an entire hour. While he was at it, DK and his friends walked by. David filled a small Ziploc with berries. At lunchtime, he stewed the berries with a little water and then sprinkled crushed up Nature Valley oats and honey trail bars on top. The huckleberry crumble was the best trail food on the entire PCT. His day ended after 27 miles at a spot simply called Pondside Tent Site. The Far Out Comets complained about mosquitoes, but apparently mosquito season was over. One less thing to worry about. DK and his friends also camped at the pond. Dave woke up to a wonderful sunrise over the pond. If you'll recall, Dave had skipped 273 miles of the Sierras, and this day he reached mile 2,273. So you know what that means. Dave had heard of Goat Rock's wilderness, but as far as he knew, it was just something you hiked through while you were in Washington. Little did he know, it was the most awe-inspiring part of Washington. Dave is just going to insert a bunch of silent photos and videos from this remarkable stretch of trail. Keep an eye out for the mountain goat, the hoary marmots, and the knife's edge. With just 13 miles to go to White's Pass, David camped at Letts Lake after a 26-mile day. Dave was eager to get to White's Pass and meet up with me. Although I had to drive 275 miles and he only had to hike 13, we had about the same travel time. This is me crossing the Columbia River into the state of Washington. I found the trailhead but had trouble parking. Once I found a spot, I hiked towards Dave. We hiked the last mile together. Dave gathered some huckleberries for me, and I brought him a Gatorade. We got a room at White Pass Village Inn, but we couldn't check in yet, so we had lunch with a view of Leech Lake. Dave had a bunch of chocolate donuts and coffee, his latest trail craving, and he made me a little bit of huckleberry crumble. While we were eating, an elk walked by. After we checked in and settled in, we wandered down the hill to the road where the Cracker Barrel is located. The Cracker Barrel is a little market and gas station on White's Pass that caters to the hikers. Their facilities include a cafe, showers, a little laundromat, and a huge eating area out the back. It probably had 40 hikers hanging around it. We hung out at the market a little and ran into Magic Hobbit. Dave introduced me and they took a selfie. Magic Hobbit was planning on leaving in the morning and Dave was planning on taking a 0 at the pass, so they'd have a day's hike between them going forward. We got dinner at the nearby town of Packwood. Specifically, we ate at the Packwood Brewing Company. That night they had live music and a couple of extra vendors on site. Dave and I split the nachos, and Dave got a couple of sausage sandwiches from the hot dog vendor. There was a food truck selling ice cream in an outdoor dining area, so we had to take advantage of that. Dave got us breakfast from the market the next morning. While he was waiting for our food, he had coffee with DK and Bozo. Doing laundry proved difficult because the market was having power problems. He had to find other hikers to split a machine with. Speaking of power problems, the inn was doing maintenance on our room's circuit breaker box, so many of our room's appliances had no power. One of those appliances was the water heater, so Dave had to take cold showers. His white hoodie needed hand washing because it was so filthy. So much fun. Dave ran into Magic Hobbit again. Magic Hobbit had a friend who was waiting for a shower. The line was long, so we offered her our shower. She was happy to use it despite the water being cold. I had to get back to Bend to take care of my dad, so I couldn't stay past noon. We said our goodbyes. I wouldn't be able to meet him again until, spoiler alert, he got to Canada. As I was driving away, a couple of girls were road walking back to the trail, so I offered them a ride. One of them was called Carrie, aka Carrots. I was becoming quite the experienced trail angel. Dave had a full pizza for dinner while he watched Fate of the Furious on the room's big screen, which was one of the few appliances that fortunately worked. Trail stop checklist. Trout Lake, skipped. White Pass and Packwood, check.